the worst thing that could happen is that you look a little stupid in front of somebody, and like compared to kind of where I grew up, that's nothing. Like, my parents went through way more difficult times than me someone thinking wrong of you at like work. Don't be scared to look maybe not the smartest person in the room. Just try to learn, and most people are there to help out.
Back to the FreeCodeCamp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people getting into tech. And this week we are joined by Tadas Petra. He is a software engineer and a senior developer advocate at Agora.io. After learning embedded development at university, he switched to building mobile apps, and he's gone on to build dozens of mobile apps and create tutorials around Flutter and other amazing developer tools. Tadas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Like, you're somebody whom I've meant to talk to for a long time. You've made this amazing history of FreeCodeCamp video a few years ago.
Yeah.
That is still probably the best rendition of like FreeCodeCamp's like first few months. Mm-hmm. and my personal backstory. So thank you very much for doing that. I linked that in the show notes. Don't go over there until after you finish this. But yeah, man, like you have moved around a lot. You've done a lot of things, and you're relatively, like, how long have you been working as a dev?
Like, what is it, 7-8 years now?
Yeah. So you're still relatively young, and I want to hear all about your transitions as a developer, because you've gone through at least 3 distinct phases as a developer. But what I'm really interested in doing is just like diving into your origin story as a developer. So my understanding is your family came over from Lithuania and immigrated to Chicago, which is the 3rd biggest city in the United States. But it's a city that a lot of people overlook because we focus on the coast, New York, LA, San Francisco, like the coastal cities. So it's really cool to actually talk to somebody who's in the same time zone as me, because Chicago and Texas are like kind of vertically aligned. Yeah. Talk about your early years, man.
So we moved to the U.S. when I was 5 years old, and my parents won the green card, I think it was called, and they got into the U.S. And I don't really remember much from the early years. I don't know if it's like some trauma that we're kind of, my brain just kind of forgets about. But my parents tell me stories that like the first few years was definitely rough because they came to the U.S. with no English. No plan really. They had one cousin that kind of ditched us as soon as we got here. We just tried to kind of survive those first few years. My mom tells me stories of how like I went to school and just cried the whole day because I didn't know what anybody else was saying. There was no Lithuanian translator or anything. But yeah, we came with not much money either. So we lived in this tiny little apartment. And I remember my mom told me a story that the time when she thought we made it in the U.S. was when we finally got like a mattress for her kids to sleep on. So those beginning years were rough. Luckily, I don't really remember too much about them, but shout out to my parents for, dealing with all that. That must have been like really, really hard. But so when we got here, that happened. Then like within, my dad finally found work through some Lithuanian connection that he found. And then he ended up being like a handyman, and then things got, progressively better over time. And then they ended up moving to this really nice suburb now, and we've been living there since I was in 4th grade. So
awesome. So like a true kind of like American immigrant success story of like literally like nothing to something to having a house. And a handyman, like just for people who are unfamiliar with the term, it's kind of like a jack of all trades, like able to do a wide variety of stuff around the house. Like, did he learn like plumbing, electrical, like any of that stuff?
So I don't think he did plumbing, but basically just whatever someone would call him to help with, like he was there and helping out with that. It was, he just basically did whatever work he could find at that point and slowly made his way up.
Yeah. So like a lot of probably carpentry and Yeah.
Mostly I think at some point he was like building the whole house for some people. I don't really know too much of all the details. I just know he did a lot of roofing, a lot of siding, a lot of all those type of jobs, just everything that, you can do with your hands and whatever people would kind of pay him for.
Yeah. And I know that had a big influence on you because I've heard you talk about the degree to which you enjoy working with your hands. And for example, completely renovating your first house that you bought, and really like being able to like tear things down and like build them up exactly the way you want. Like, is a lot of that stemming from your dad's roots of just getting things done with his hands?
Yeah, I think it's got to be. I don't know, because he did our whole house when they bought that suburb house. He did the same thing. He redid everything, all the flooring and everything. And when I was younger, I had to help him, and at that point, I didn't really like it. But then now it's kind of nice to see, you start from scratch. Like we basically tore the whole house apart when we got here, and we saw it be transformed from just like concrete and wooden boards on the floor to this nice, half decent looking house now. It's still my first house, so like now I'm looking back at it and I wish I could have done things a little different, but just the same as like with everything in life, the first things you're not going to do perfect, but you learn a lot along the way, and then the second time it's going to be a lot better. Yeah,
it's all about iterating, man.
Yep.
And I almost look at like generational, like your parents are kind of like doing an iteration, and you learn what you can, and then you try to implement that, and if you have kids, you try to pass on the lessons you've learned to your kids, and hope every generation hopes that the one that follows it has a slightly easier time and is able to get a little bit more done, not make as many mistakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's also been nice that my dad did actually help, and like I got married like a year ago now. So my wife's dad is the same exact way. She's also an immigrant, like came here when she was 5. Pretty similar story throughout. So both of them did help out a lot. So it was also nice little bonding time with the parents and kind of going back to the roots.
Yeah. So do your in-laws get along pretty well?
They don't speak the same language, so it's not. Yeah, she's Polish, so like it's close, but the language isn't the same. And like they both can. Like during the wedding, they communicated. After a few drinks, they were good at talking to each other. But they're getting along now a little bit more, but not that much.
Yeah.
I don't think they have each other's number yet.
Yeah, my parents don't speak Chinese, and my in-laws don't speak English, so a lot of it is just us kind of like trying to interpret for them, or it's pretty messy. And I guess you have to take like Lithuania and then probably tell your wife, and then she has to translate it to Polish. So it's like an extra link in the communication chain. And do you speak Polish?
I've been learning for the past year. I'm not, of course, not great, but like I think I could get around in Poland if I had to. Like I could figure out where the bathroom is, all that stuff. But I still can't have a full conversation with her parents yet. But I can tell them a few words.
Awesome. Yeah. Huge country, like really chill folks. Like I've met so many Polish people over the years, and they've just been like super duper chill. So, yeah. Well, that's fantastic, man. So I'm interested. So after you kind of grew up and you got stability, your mom's happy because you've got a mattress to sleep on, which is just a profound thing. Like when we think about like the kind of like lavish lifestyle that you and I probably enjoy compared to, what your parents endured when they came here. Chicago is brutally cold too.
Yep.
Was that a big part of it? Like did you all have heat in the winters and stuff?
So like I said, most of my memory is from just stories, because I was young and like I don't know, maybe just my memory just doesn't want to remember that part. But she just hasn't said anything about that. I'm sure we had heating. It was an apartment. I think we were on a higher floor. But yeah, I just remember the story. She's like, we had like a little blanket that we would put on the floor, and then pillows and a mattress. When we got those, we felt a lot better.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I think at first, they only got one for like the kids, for me and my sister, and then they got themselves one, and then we were living lavish.
Right on. Yeah. Well, so where do you go from there? Because you were able to go through high school and ultimately go to university and study computer engineering, which is a great field to study. Maybe you can talk about like your academic progression and like how you kind of like adjusted. Obviously, you learned English. You sound like a native speaker. So like, what transpired?
Yeah, I think that the rest is, more the typical straightforward story. Like we went to, I went switched between a few schools while I was really young, and then around fourth grade is when we moved to that suburb, and it's a pretty nice suburb where there's good schools and everything. So at that point, I just went on the normal learning track. Did good in school. I think I got a 4.0 if I remember correctly in high school. So but it's high school, so it's not that crazy.
That's still, it's like a perfect GPA, grade point average.
Yeah. Maybe I'm misremembering it, right? Maybe, but it was definitely close if it wasn't. And then I actually did get into. There was two universities that were really common to go to. I guess there's more, but out of state, that wasn't really a question for me because we still, we were in a nice suburb, but we still didn't have much money to be going out of state to all the different universities. So there was kind of two options for me, really. It was University of Illinois at Chicago and then U of I, which is University of Illinois at Champaign, which is a really, really good engineering school. And I ended up getting into University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I got into both, but I decided to go to University of Illinois at Chicago just because it was way, 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 way cheaper. I got a lot of funding from FAFSA and everything to, basically I think I only paid a few grand the first couple years, and then it went up a little bit afterwards. But Urbana-Champaign would have been a lot more expensive. And there, the first freshman year, I kind of went in not really knowing what to do. I knew I was good at math. That was my best subject in like all my years growing up, and I really enjoyed it. So I knew I wanted something math based, or I didn't really know. I guess I just kind of went in and just saw what happened, and I knew that engineering was like a high value field, and then medicine was like, of course, a high value field as well. But I don't do good around blood, so I'm like, all right, let's try something engineering. I went into the first like seminar or something talking about all the different types of engineering, and I started as a civil engineer because that's what I met a kid that I became friends with. He was doing civil engineering. I'm like, yeah, I'll try it too. And then it just like wasn't for me, and then I found computer engineering was a lot closer to what I wanted to do. So then started learning that.
Yeah, well, maybe you can talk. First of all, congratulations on getting into University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. That's a mouthful. Like Ooey Pooey, I think is like Purdue is like part of that school system, but very prestigious engineering program. And I applaud you for making the economical decision and just going to the cheaper place because it sounds like you were able to dodge a lot of debt that you would have incurred had you gone to the. And people ask me all the time, like, go ahead and apply for the fancy schools and see if you can get in, but it might make more sense to ultimately attend like the less expensive alternatives, especially if they're also reputable institutions. You don't need the most prestigious, you just need a good enough degree, in my humble opinion, at least for engineering. Maybe for like business or something like that. It's more, you should try to go to Wharton or something, but not necessarily with engineering.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking back, like I'm so happy with that decision. I think if I was to advise my kids, like it's just you don't need to spend all that money. Like if you get that good enough university degree, you have a degree, it says like you're qualified. The first job that you get is going to be way more important than like anything else, really. I feel like after that first job, nobody really remembers where you go to school anymore. But getting that first job is, I feel like, definitely the hardest part.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's the real challenge that every developer faces, regardless of what they studied in school when they get their first developer job. Maybe you can talk about like your time at university and like transitioning. Were you able to get any internships along the way?
Yes. So in university, like I knew I had to make it count because it is like 4 years, and I still was at that moment was still a good amount of money, like thousands of dollars per year on spent just learning before school didn't really cost that much, and now we're spending a lot of money. And my parents did help me a little bit to pay for it, but mostly I paid like 80 maybe 90% like myself just by working really hard in the summers. So I knew I had to make it count. Like I knew I was spending money and I didn't want it to go to waste. So I had internships every single year. So the first year I got into a program that was part of the university. It was I forget what it's called. It's like the Guaranteed Paid Internship Program, I think. GPIP. That sounds right. So it's like if you got a good enough grades during the course of the year, you got a guaranteed paid internship for the summer. I think they can link you up with different companies, but I think maybe there wasn't enough companies or something like that, where I ended up working for the actual university, just learning Android development there. So I spent the summer in the research department with these two other, I think they were actually doing research. So they were building real stuff while I was on the side kind of just learning Android development and building games for fun pretty much. Yeah, it wasn't really a real internship. It was just kind of learning games and learning how to build games in Android. And I built like this little Flappy Bird simulator. So that was cool because I also got paid for it. So it was like my first like real paid development job. It was my freshman year of college.
Getting paid to learn. So, hard to argue with that.
Yep. Getting paid to build like Flappy Bird games. That was fantastic. And it wasn't like this grungy little building in the research building at UIC. So it was kind of funny walking into there every day. It's like these little offices and the lights are kind of dark. And you just sit there with two researchers like on the other side of the room, just, doing real stuff. And you're just in the corner learning how to develop. But I was definitely grateful. Then sophomore year was the harder one because I didn't get anything that was like that I wanted. So that year, but I did a free internship that year. And like, I don't know if I would do it again, but I did a free internship in this part of Chicago called Englewood, which is like kind of a dangerous place in Chicago. And I was in I forget, it's like some government thing, and I helped with social media there. Again, I didn't really do much there. That was something that I'm proud of. Like, there's nothing to look back on and being like, wow, I really accomplished something. I built something that's used today, but I did help create some images, create some social media posts, and it was like the very early on of the whole social media. And I didn't get paid, and it was super far, and it was like staying a little bit later there. You were a little scared, but it worked out. And then my junior year, so the last year before graduating, I ended up applying, I think, to, I don't know, at least hundreds, if not close to like 1,000 different places. Maybe not 1,000, that might be exaggerating, but hundreds for sure of different places to try to get like a real internship for that summer, because that was the summer before I graduate. Like, I needed to get something. And I ended up getting this internship at this company called Navistar. So if you maybe haven't heard of Navistar, but you might have heard of International Trucks and IC Bus. So International Trucks are, I think, the second or third most popular trucks, like semi trucks in the U.S. And IC Bus is like the most popular yellow bus that you see taking kids to school. So the Navistar is the parent company of those. So I ended up working there as a computer engineering intern. And yeah, I got paid that summer, and then I did pretty good, and I got offered the full-time job like right out of college. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's the dream, is that you don't have to do like this awkward like post college like job search, because one of your internships takes you on. It sounds like, I mean, if you think about like the software that powers trucks, the software that powers buses, like those are mission critical systems, right? Like something goes wrong in a, I don't know, like 20-ton truck that's like huge. It's on the road with all these people in these cars, probably traveling quite fast, tons of kinetic energy, right?
Yep.
There can be no room for failure. Maybe you can talk about like, what were you doing? Like, so you were working on software that was part of a truck.
Yep. So I guess maybe I could back up a little bit. Like, what I studied in college was software engineering, and software engineering, like, you can go different routes with software engineering. I mean, computer engineering. Sorry, I was doing computer engineering. You could go different routes with computer engineering. You could go like the more hardware way, or you could do the more software way. And I actually went the more hardware way, where I learned a lot of how to design processors, for example, how to like design different sorts of hardware, and how to write assembly code to like run on that hardware, and like how the bits go through all the hardware pieces. And I thought that's where I actually wanted my career to go. But Navistar was just the only company that accepted me, and there I had to write C code. And I took 2 software classes in college. So it was like intro to CS, where you just learn the very basics, and then data structures and algorithms was the second CS class. And it was actually my worst class that I took in college. I got a I passed with a C minus because they rounded up my 69.7 to a C minus, and that's my worst grade in college. That's the only C I got. Like I thought I didn't really like development, but I got the job at Navistar, and then I'm going in with very little, coding knowledge, like not that good. I obviously did terrible in data structures and algorithms. That's kind of usually the big part of any development job. So I'm going in and I'm writing code that, like you said, has to go directly to trucks and could be pretty dangerous code. But the team was fantastic there. Like when I got in, my boss was phenomenal. I definitely put in my own work because I had to. Before I even started, I learned C. I went online and just kind of learned at least the basics of C so that I'm not looking stupid when on my first day. But once I got in, he was super helpful. Taught me basically everything that I needed to know about C and how to be a good developer. My strategy that I think really helped me grow during that time was not being scared to look stupid, even though I didn't want to. In front of my boss, I knew I could trust him. I asked him the worst questions. And I remember even during that internship, I think there was a few days. It was probably 3 days of trying to debug a problem, and I kept going to him what's going on? I have no idea what's going on. Why isn't it working? It should definitely be working. And he was even looking at it. And then after 3 days, we finally found that there was a missing semicolon somewhere. That's a story I'll remember for a long time. But they didn't have for writing C, you don't have as cool editors as VS Code where or AI that auto completes everything for you. We're writing line by line, letter by letter, making sure everything's good. So that was cool. And the reason it wasn't so scary, I guess, to release software to trucks is part of the reason why I ended up leaving. In the end as well from that company was because building safety critical software goes through very, very rigorous process. We had to have reviews for every single step of the process. Before we even start writing any code, the coding part was probably the shortest amount of time spent. You don't really worry about the coding part because there was just so much upfront work that needed to be done before you even got to coding. We had to do requirements, which is where you have to write out in English. You have to use a very strict language based on whatever. There's a requirements document that you have to kind of follow. You have to use strict language with it. You have to make sure the words are exactly how you want them, and then you have to do a requirements review where you're getting your work reviewed, whether you're even solving the right problem in the right way before you even start working on the problem. And then that could go through multiple rounds of reviews. So we're just writing a sentence, and you have people judge every single word and every letter of your sentence, whether that sentence is the right sentence. And then you got a design document that you have to make. So the design, you basically write out the code step by step, and then you have to go through this design review. So that whole section could take a few review cycles. So when you get to the code, it's you pretty much wrote out the code in the design section. It's pretty straightforward. And then that gets reviewed, and then you have to write tests, and the tests have to get reviewed, and then there's a whole test team, and they have their own review cycle. So it goes through so many reviews that so many people would have to miss everything, and it's not. It almost doesn't feel like it's on you anymore. As a new person, it's not as scary because people that have a lot of experience have already looked at it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, in a way, the fact that the process is so rigorous is actually kind of freeing because you do have experts around you the entire way who've been there, who are scrutinizing every aspect of your code, and I love that, that idea of creating a spec and having extremely, terse descriptive language, strict language, so that you're making sure that you're actually solving a real problem and that your approach has sound reasoning underneath it, right? I feel like a lot of people just fire up their editor and start, I'm going to bang out a feature, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. I got this feature up. And that's how a lot of web development, probably a lot of mobile app development, which we'll talk about a lot in a minute. But that's how a lot of it's done. And And yet, when it comes to actually doing stuff where like systems are mission critical, like I've heard about, like the missions for like the lunar mission, right?
Yep.
When we sent people to the moon, that code had to be reviewed probably at least as, strictly as the code that you're writing. Maybe it's a very similar
Probably
process.
more.
But the point is, people's lives are at stake, right? If a system fails while a truck is going 80 miles an hour down a highway, people could die, right?
Yep.
And it's just like, and that company could be that could be a PR disaster, and it could, I can understand the degree of care that goes into that. And one of the reasons that a lot of people are afraid, like AI is going to take our jobs, I hear this all the time, and I think people fundamentally misunderstand like the process of writing code, and what coding is doing is essentially, it's like thinking really hard about what the problem is, then thinking really hard about how to solve that problem, and thinking about really hard about like the actual solution to that problem, and testing it and making sure everything works. Because yes, there are lots of like social media apps and stuff, like you and I could go and have fun building a social media app, maybe do a weekend hackathon or something, but that's not like mission critical stuff, right? Yep. That's not going to be running on some satellite where it's like very difficult to physically reach it, or impossible to reach it, right? That's not going to be running on some, vehicle that's traveling very quickly that is potentially dangerous, right? It's not going to necessarily be running on some factory floor. It's going to be running, in the cloud somewhere where, like, if it goes wrong, the worst thing that happens is people are inconvenienced, right? Like, oh, the site crashed again. I'm getting the Twitter fail wheel again. You can get away with just kind of like having bad process and just throwing things together when you're doing something like building Twitter. But you can't get away with that when you're building software that's going to power a truck. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, 100%. But I think that's why it got a little boring to work there after like a few years, just because that like the whole process that we go through weeks long might be just for writing one single line of code. Like you might not, or maybe not even writing a single line of code, maybe just changing a number within a line of code. So yeah, I totally understand it. It was, I think, a great introduction to, the whole engineering world, because you were so rigorous and you have to make sure every little piece worked. But then it did get kind of, a little boring, and that's kind of why it went to mobile, because you make a problem in a mobile app, it's just slight inconvenience, but it doesn't really matter as much. I mean, you want to, it matters. You want to make sure you send quality, but at the end of the day, you're not putting any lives in danger. Yeah.
So what do? You realize like, hey, I'm learning a lot. I mean, you went basically through the crucible, right? Like you had your software engineering chops forged on the job, it sounds like, even though you didn't do well in your coding classes. You did learn C, which is the basis of most embedded systems and most high performance computing and everything. C is like the language. If you can only learn one language and how to do everything, ultimately like Python runs on top of C, right? Same thing with like JavaScript, Ruby, like all the scripting languages, I believe, are C under a few layers of abstraction. So in a way, that is probably the most important programming language in the world. So you got a ton of experience with that. And then, so you're eyeing the exit, and you're looking for something where it's going to be like less process oriented and more free flowing, like just building stuff, iterating quickly.
So not really. Actually, when I, so while I was working there, I needed to get that kind of like creative fix, that little, creativity outlet that I needed. So I actually started creating, I guess I kept this on throughout most of the time, but like when I first started, there was no time to learn anything or do anything else. But then I got a little comfortable in the role. I needed some way to keep, that learning process going. So I started building websites. I started building apps just for fun. And then I just ran across this framework called Flutter from Google. And there was just not much learning resources online. And I was trying to build, an app that people would use. And I was having a tough time because there's just not much out there. And there was a few people on YouTube doing it. And I'm like, I'll learn how to create videos. And maybe I could be part of the ecosystem of helping teach people how to build with Flutter specifically, because there's not that much. Yeah. So during that whole time, I wasn't really planning an exit. I was just kind of trying to have a creative outlet and do something outside of work that filled that little creative outlet. So I started recording videos and stuff. Yeah.
Which year you got into Flutter? Because Flutter is relatively young. I think it was released in like 2015, and then like the 1.0 was like a few years later.
So I got in the beta period. So it was before the 1.0. It was like 6 months before 1.0 came out. That's when I first started. I started making videos, I think, either about the time it came out, I think. So I got in super early. And the reason, like, I was just looking at building applications because like I said, I did that Android development way back in the day, and honestly, it wasn't that fun. Like, Android development just didn't seem like something I wanted to really focus on. Web development was cool, but it was just also like pretty hard. I tried to build a social media application. So yeah, I guess maybe the reason I started even with mobile development, because I tried to build a social media application on web using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like just those two.
Yeah.
Just those three. And then Ajax, I think I remember using. So just bare levels, on web development stuff. And I tried to build a social media site, and I tried to build the DM feature in that social media site. And I just ran into a whole bunch of multi-threading issues. And I'm like, I don't know what multi-threading even is. Like, I had to take a step back and like learn the basics of, web development, kind of get a better grasp of this before I try to actually build something. Then I just thought mobile apps might be easier. So, go ahead.
Well, my immediate question is, are mobile apps like essentially just like a front end? You still need like a back end that has all the, concurrency issues and everything like that?
Yeah. At that point, I just I didn't know that. I think like
so you thought you were escaping, but you weren't escaping. You were just going. It's like you open a door and it leads to another door.
Yep.
Or like two doors, they lead back to the same atrium or something like that, where you ultimately have to learn all the software, like the web development. Concepts.
Exactly. So I thought I was getting past it, but in theory, like I kind of did get past it because Flutter does abstract a lot of that stuff away. I used Flutter and Firestore for the backend, Firebase for the backend. So like Firebase just does everything for you on the backend sense, and Flutter does actually have one thread that it runs on. So until you're doing things that really need it, you can't spin up like other threads, but until you like need some hard computation, you can just run everything on that main thread. So I kind of did escape it for a bit, but I did obviously have to learn it eventually. So I started learning Android development. I'm like, I don't really like Android development, and I'm like, if it doesn't, like, I use an iPhone, I don't want to be building Android apps and then not be really able to use them. So then I looked into building iOS apps, and then I thought that building just iOS apps, like most of the world uses Android,
right.
So you're kind of just limiting yourself to there. So then I looked at cross-platform. At that moment, there was just I actually worked with this thing called Ionic.
Yeah, so early multi-platform development tool.
Right. So Ionic was cool because you're just writing in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I think, if I remember correctly, and then it just creates a web view on your application. Well, back then it did. I haven't followed up. So it almost seemed like when I was building those, it seemed like you're creating a website for your. And you just click it like an app, but it's really a website behind the scenes.
I kind of think of it as like a mobile app shell around a web app.
Yep. So that was cool. And I built a little stuff with there, but then I wanted to go like a little deeper into, I think I tried to get like camera working or like deep integrations within the actual phone. And at that moment, it was a little more limiting. So I wanted to find something that actually like uses, like is properly built to be running as a mobile application. At that moment, there was React Native and then the brand new thing, Flutter. I didn't really do that much research into it. I kind of just went with Flutter because at that moment, I think I just didn't like Facebook, and I knew that Facebook made React Native, and I'm like, I like Google as a company better, and I just went with Flutter. Looking back on it, like either one would have been fine. But I did, like, learning and writing Flutter was the first time I found a lot of joy in like writing mobile apps. Like HTML and CSS and JavaScript were fun, but it did get a little complicated because you have all these different files. You have the HTML that you have to learn, then you have to learn CSS, then you have to learn JavaScript. Like there's 3 parts minimum that you have to learn in order to build a website. And then, the whole ecosystem, as you know, is like massive and there's so many different things to learn. With Flutter, there's just Flutter. Like you just learn Flutter and there's packages. Like I said, Firebase. But if you have Flutter and you have Firebase, you're pretty much, you can build a lot of applications with just that.
Yeah, and you've created a ton of courses, and I'm going to encourage everybody to check out your YouTube channel. I've added the link to it in the show notes after you finish listening to this conversation. But Flutter is amazing. I'll just personally endorse Flutter because FreeCodeCamp uses Flutter extensively. If you've used the FreeCodeCamp mobile apps, either the iOS app or the Android app, Flutter, the new testing environment that we're building for administering like English certification exams and the final exam of the FreeCodeCamp, certifications and stuff. Spoiler alert, where if this comes out before our anniversary date, on the 10th, on the 10-year anniversary of FreeCodeCamp, I've got like a whole bunch of announcements that are coming out. But basically, we're going to have exams, and that exam environment is written in Flutter, and it'll run on any device, right? So it's just like very cool multi-platform development. Like you can, in theory, like run Flutter apps on, Windows or on Mac, and it's just like write once, run anywhere. It's like the Java dream realized, 25 years later, 30 years later. So yeah, you don't have to sell me on Flutter, Tadas, but I do want to sell everybody listening to this. Flutter is an amazing piece of tech. And we haven't used it with Firebase, but Firebase is like Google. I guess Google acquired Firebase, and it's basically just like a cloud database that is pretty damn convenient to develop for. Like I went to a hackathon and I built an app, and it was amazing how much it did for me. I felt like I was cheating.
So I think when I was learning it, I thought like development was like super easy, and like creating a backend, like people will talk about building backends, and I'm like, what do you mean building? You just connect to Firebase and it just does everything for you. Why are you building backends? And then the past few years, I've finally been learning what a real backend is, and I'm like, wow, yeah, Firebase just does like so much for you. And but it does make it really easy to build. If you want to build basically on any platform, Flutter makes it, I feel like, one of the easiest ways to do it.
So maybe you can contrast Flutter a little bit with just building using like Android Studio and like the core standard issue, Google issued Android development tools, because you did build some with those.
Yes. Not too much though. Like I said, those were when I was first beginning, so I never became great at Android applications or proficient. I personally just didn't like Android Studio just because that meme of it where you turn on Android Studio and then like your whole computer and your setup turns on fire just because it runs so loud. As your computer gets hot and you can cook like hamburgers on your computer after you turn on Android Studio. So yeah, that like I definitely had that in my computer, even though I thought it was powerful, but every time I would turn on Android Studio, it was just like just purr. So I since like the very early days, I started using VS Code for Flutter and everything. But when I did work in Android Studio, I think the thing about Android having to support so many devices and all these different use cases, and I think most people don't update their devices as much as they do with iOS. So having to just have all these corner cases makes Android development a lot more difficult because there's just so many things to keep track of and make sure it fits with all the devices. Make sure, and the tooling is built to help you do that. But then there's a lot more tooling than just writing your application. So I think that was the part that I didn't really like about Android development, and it just seemed overly complicated. And I think that's the thing that annoys me when technology is more complex than it needs to be, unless you actually want to want it to be complex. Like for example, I don't use Linux much, but I do like Linux, and it is overly complicated. But that's because you're learning a lot about how a computer works. But when I'm just trying to build a Android application, like I want it to be easy, and I think Flutter makes it easy. And that's why I was that's why it tickled that creative thing just perfectly, because I could build real apps that I could send out to users.
Yeah. Maybe you could talk about the advantages of just building mobile apps in general. Like, do you still think that there's room for mobile apps in 2025 we're heading into? Like, are people still going to be downloading mobile apps, or are they used to just, opening things up in their browser? Like, what have you observed as somebody who builds mobile apps and also has a foot in the web development world as far as like consumer preference?
So I think this is what, from what I've read about stuff that I agree with, is mobile. They have different purposes. Kind of, if you have a mobile app that's successful, I think it's a lot higher value than a website, because like you're living on someone's device. Like every time they open it, you see your icon there. I guess with websites you can like bookmark them, but people close their bookmarks, and it's not as, you're not in their on their like device natively, not natively, but you're not living right on their device. I think that's super powerful, and if you get them to use your application often, I think people on mobile devices it becomes. I don't really like social apps that much, but you know how much social apps, like they get you looped in. If you have it on your phone, like personally, I have all my social apps deleted off my phone, because I know if I have them on my phone, like I'm going in there, I'm looped in. Using them through the website is a little bit higher friction, and the experience isn't as clean. You don't get as much stimulation and like backdrop from just clicking on the website. So I think if you can get an app that people enjoy to use, hopefully something good, something that's helpful to that's helpful to many people, then I think the apps are much higher value. However, the way I think about it is I build websites and apps for different reasons. So a website, I feel like, just like it's always been, is mostly for content sharing, and like something that you can build web apps there. And like if you needed to use it on a desktop, then that's great. Like this, it's a great option to build web apps, but I like it. I like to think about it as a content first platform, unless it's something that needs to be a web app. There's exceptions to everything. But for example, like I'm building this. I was just building this to-do app for fun. Like I don't want the to-do app to be in a website. Like I don't want to have to go open this whole website, type in a URL just to do a to-do app. I want it on my home screen. I want to be able to tap it. I want to be able to tap to-do, and I want to be able to create maybe widgets on my phone that I could tap it right there. There's like a website would just be annoying at that point. But for example, building like freeCodeCamp or a blog or courses or something, I think website makes a lot more sense, because you want that to be accessible to a ton of people. You want them to be sitting at their desk and having that type of viewing experience. So I think it's harder than ever to get an app that does well, that people use. But same thing, it's harder than ever to get a website that people use. So I think it's just you have to think about where you want it to be first.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about distribution. So there's this common saying that like first time entrepreneurs think about technology, second time entrepreneurs think about distribution. And of course the web is the ultimate distribution platform, in the sense that you literally just, there's a QR code, or you tell someone some URL, freeCodeCamp.org, and they type that in and they're there. They're at your product, right? It's as simple as that. They don't have to download anything. They don't have to really do anything. But at the same time, the web feels very fleeting, in the sense that like I navigate away from the web page and I'm no longer in your realm, right? And there's nothing to remind me to go back to that, other than maybe using some different medium like email. But with the app, you have like push notifications, you've got all these other things, and it's much easier when I'm sitting down in the bathroom for a minute. I won't say what I'm going to be doing sitting in the bathroom, but I imagine that a lot of people sit in the bathroom every single day and do this, and they pull out their phone and they're like, okay, like they probably just tap one of the icons on the screen, right? And like, okay, I wonder what's on Reddit. wonder what's on Twitter, wonder what's on TikTok or whatever people are like opening up, right? Maybe some people are opening up freeCodeCamp and doing some of the coding challenges in freeCodeCamp. We do have very bite-sized challenges that fit into, a 1 or 2 minute bathroom session. But my point is that it's much easier to like open up a web app than it is to like open up Firefox. Okay, now I'm going to type in the address I want to go to, or I'm going to scroll through my bookmarks. Okay, I want to, read this website or something like that. And it's happening to an extent that like people say that the web has been dying for a long time just because it's been mobile app-ified, in the sense that like a lot of mobile apps are just mobile apps because it's a convenient way to like remind people to click on it. And they say the most expensive real estate in the world isn't like on Park Avenue, it's on an iPhone home screen, right? And I can definitely see the value, and that's one of the reasons we built a mobile app, is so that we can be one of those icons that people click on when they're going to the bathroom, right?
The thing about distribution is something I just keep like remembering, because I'd build an app and I'll just be like, I just want to put it out there and then see what happens. I'll write like one little tweet about it, and it gets a few downloads and nobody really sees it. But then you see people that have a whole distribution campaign about how to show off their new things, and that's how you actually get people to use it. And like you said with websites, I imagine that usually on the first like URL click, you probably get some people that will remember the site and use it again, but I feel like it's got to be like 5 or more maybe clicks before it becomes a site that they visit. Whereas an app, you can just download it once and then it's there on your home screen. Like they have to actively go to remove it from their home screen. And I think I've seen some people on Twitter like they been pretty successful with launching apps. I think Nikita Beer or something, he's launched applications. They always go to the top spot on App Store real quick, and a bunch of people download it. And I don't know how those apps are doing now, but I imagine there is still people that it's on their home screens and it's still taking up real estate on their phones. It's an interesting thing, and I think you just have to think about where and how you want to approach showing off your work.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because distribution is so critical and getting people to actually use your app. So just to conclude kind of like what we were talking about, I think the benefit of the web apps is you just get it up quickly. People can go directly there. They get the full experience regardless of what device they're on. They don't have to download anything, but it's not sticky, right? Mobile apps is much harder to get it to be installed, but there's much long, like the total time on site for a free CodeCamp visit might be like, 10 minutes or something. People are reading some articles or doing some quick coding challenges and they go, and you don't necessarily know that they're going to come back. But with a mobile app, people might check in every single day. They might get a push notification. Oh, it's time to do, Duolingo or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they're like clicking through and they're like doing it, and then they're closing it. And then tomorrow at the same time, they're going to get another reminder. They're going to open up and do it again. And I think Sergey Brin, Google founder, said that the best products are like toothbrushes that you're like using every day, and that way you're staying on top of mind because people are busy. They got so much stuff going on. So that, it sounds like the biggest value add of getting a mobile app is not necessarily accessing more technology, though arguably you do have better access to like a device and like the camera and like the, sensors and all those different things that, you have to give permission to access and stuff. But you can access those device features probably in a native way that you cannot access through a browser, or that might be a little bit clunkier to work with in a browser. But I still think the main reason why mobile apps have come to dominate, because Twitter doesn't use any of that stuff, and Reddit doesn't use any of that stuff. They're just basically, as you said, content, right? Like typing text. You can do that in a website just as easily as you can do it in or uploading a photo. It's not significantly less friction for the user, but the mobile app form factor being a button on the home screen, I think that's why mobile apps are so sticky, and why a lot of people, like everybody, has to have a mobile app, because it's just, a lot of people will expect you to have a mobile app. But yeah, like a lot of the apps I use every day, I prefer to use them in a browser. But given that I have the limited form factor of a phone, I'll accept, okay, I guess I'll use their app, right? I'll use the YouTube app, even though the YouTube website is much easier to like browse and search and like leave comments and read comments and read the show notes and like all those other things. I will use the YouTube apps because I have to, because I'm not taking my laptop with me everywhere I go. I'm not taking it to the bathroom, you know? Yeah. So I can see arguments based on that. So it's primarily like a distribution and convenience thing is kind of how I view it, rather than like some technological, like the CPU in your phone is probably not substantially better than, you know, the hardware in your computer. And you have the keyboard and everything, like you can type a lot faster, you got a bigger screen, all this stuff. I love using the full computer, and not I would never just be one of those people that's content to just do everything through a phone. I feel like that's like an impoverished way to do it. And of course, I understand there are probably lots of people that are listening to this podcast. We have a lot of listeners who may not actually own a laptop, and that may be something they're saving up to buy. And I will tell you, it's absolutely worth it. Save up and get the proper computer, even if it's just like a hand-me-down, because you unlock so much creativity. I always like to think of phones as primarily a device for consuming, and laptops a device for producing. Yeah. You can code on the phone, but it's hard to do.
I was going to say the same thing, that like I'm the same way as you. Like even though I still, you know, develop apps and everything, I try to not use my phone as much as I can. Like I think there was a point where I got a little too into all the applications, and nowadays like I don't touch my phone most of the day, just because, like you said, one is for consuming, the other one is for producing. And I have like this mental state whenever I'm in front of my computer, like not to, you know, go to all these not to watch YouTube on here, because here when I'm in front of the computer, like I want to be actually doing stuff, and then use my phone for when I'm, you know, just trying to consume passively. But yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, like my least productive hours are like at night after I get the kids to bed. I, you know, finish bath time and everything, and I just get out and I'll just pull out my phone and watch some video essay about like get on speed running or something, and then I'm always like, oh man, like I could have just gone to sleep an hour early and woke up and got some work done.
The worst part about that is like the way I tricked myself before was that when I'm using the phone, like I've always watched educational stuff. Like I've never been like, you know, I've never gotten into TikTok. I'd always be on YouTube, like learning about how cars work, for example. Like in a sense, that's kind of cool. Like I don't want to lose that completely from my life. But then when you end up you sacrifice your day, the producing hours that you have doing that, then you're like, I don't know, this is maybe not the best. A little hack that I don't know if anyone might find this useful, but what I've learned to do is I got like an Apple Watch, and I literally just leave my phone in a different room. It doesn't have to be an Apple Watch, Android watch, whatever. A watch basically that can notify you of like important notifications. So you turn off everything that's not important, except, you know, like your kids or something, whatever is important to you in life. You turn on those notifications on your watch, and then throw your phone in like as far away from your room as you can. And then I basically don't touch it all day, because I know if there's something important that I need to, it's right on my wrist. Yeah.
I mean, like, I actually don't even know where my phone is. I left it somewhere around the house. But like, I actually, like, there was this really weird interaction. Like, I like dropped my kids off at school one day, and I accidentally left my phone there, and I didn't go back until like 2 or 3 o'clock. I was like, hey, did I leave my phone here? They're like, wow, you've gone all day without like your phone. Like they thought it was so weird that I didn't use my phone all day. And I'm like, but I mean, like phones are a huge part of people's lives. Yep. You know, I mean, like walking around like China, where I was over the summer, or in Japan and stuff, people constantly are looking at their phone. Mm-hmm. It's like, even when they're walking and stuff.
I don't know. I personally, I'm really fighting against it, because I really don't like that. Like where the world is going with the whole being in front of your phone. Like I've had, you know, hanging out with some friends, like some of them just, we're trying to talk, and you'll see a few of them just scrolling on social media. I'm like, come on. Am I not entertaining enough? But they are, like I said, they're definitely useful. I just I try to spend more time producing instead of consuming on it. And
and just a pro tip for anybody who's watching this on their phone, like close the screen and just put it in your pocket and listen to us talk. You're not missing anything. Looking at our faces, looking at, you know, Paperboy from 1985 or something like that, the classic arcade game in the background. I just put that on to have some visual element here, but like, you're not missing anything. Put that phone in your pocket and like go for a walk. That's where I listen to so many podcasts. I listened to several interviews with you this morning, just preparing. And it's just so relaxing to go for a walk outside in nature or go for a walk in, some air conditioned shopping mall or something like that. If you have one of those nearby, if it's too hot or too cold. And, just that's how I take in most of my information.
One of my favorite ways is, go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of video essays and stuff, like you don't actually have to watch them. You can just put it in your phone and you still get most of the information. There's some visual element, but a lot of times they're just running B-roll and stuff anyway, or it's just the person talking at you. But yeah, you can consume so much while you're listening and then like looking at the world around you or going and doing stuff, going to the gym, commuting, all those things. So
yeah. I was going to say, that's also, the other reason why I like the smartwatch is because you can connect headphones to it, and you can listen to that podcast, and then your hands are free. And I, in my best moments, I'm working on, something around the house or building something physically with my hands, and you're, you're doing something with your hands, and then you're also learning something new from a podcast or like you said, a video essay. I think that's my ideal best moment of, you're kind of passively, getting away from just coding in front of your computer to doing something and also still learning. Yeah.
I'm going to mow my lawn today and do the weed eating and everything. And I'm going to definitely, I throw on my big, I don't know how to describe them. Like you might imagine a police officer wearing it when they're shooting in Lethal Weapon or something. They're basically these big earmuffs that cancel a whole bunch of decibels, and it's Bluetooth enabled. So I just throw those on and listen to podcasts when I'm mowing the lawn or doing other chores around the house. Yeah, and precisely get away from screens. Don't look at screens all day long. But anyway, I don't want to be like old man yelling at a cloud. These young whippersnappers always have their face buried in a screen, even when I'm trying to have a conversation with them. But yeah, you are building mobile apps, and I'm not gonna let's talk about the ethics of mobile apps and taking up people's time. That conversation's been hashed out a million times. But maybe you can talk about your mobile app workflow and how it differs from being a web app developer, because you've done web apps and now you're doing primarily mobile apps. And I'm excited to learn kind of what your typical, let's say you just create a new project. Maybe you can just walk us through verbally, very high level, how you would do that and how that would be a little bit different from what you would do for a web app.
Sure. So to put, I guess, a little way to close on the last point, there is a lot of great apps and good things. I learned Polish sort of through Duolingo, and I had that daily, in the morning, I got the notification, and that's amazing. And everything you can produce from your computer screen is also amazing too. So there's definitely a lot of positives. So just sometimes people, take it too far. In terms of Flutter or mobile versus app development, I think the thing I really, so I guess maybe the reason I wanted to get into more web development was because, not that I mastered Flutter or anything, but I felt I got to a point where I was comfortable building almost anything that I really needed with Flutter. Probably not some crazy, next gen thing, but if there was a simpler project, I knew how to architect it right. I knew how to make sure the state was managed properly. I knew how to, learn new packages and how to use the new packages. I felt like I was comfortable within the Flutter environment. So I wanted to challenge myself a little bit and learn web, because that was the thing that, if we go back, I wasn't too comfortable in, where I had to kind of stop. So I did that. I also wanted to build a course learning platform. So it was kind of, I think the best way to just learn is just by building things. So I started going into Next.js. That was the most popular one, and uses React. I learned that. And then I found Astro, which is another framework that you can use any other, you can use React files, you can use all that. So I started working with Astro, and I had the same moment that I had with Flutter, again with Astro, where I was like, this is how web development should be. Things are simplified, it's fun, and you can get things done. And I think that the big difference between how you get started with each one is that with the website, it seems to be, at this moment, it's a lot easier to build something and put it out to people than it is with a mobile application. And I love that part. You can, using tools like Vercel, you can create just a demo Astro project or Next.js project. You can click like one button to connect your GitHub to Vercel, and there you have a live link that you can share with people, and you just iterate and build on top of that. So that's super easy. When it comes to a Flutter project, there's a whole process. The Android process isn't that bad, but the iOS is definitely difficult. For Android, you do have to pay a one-time $25 fee unless they raised it in order to even be able to submit your app to the App Store. And then there's a whole process of bundling your applications, creating a listing for it, putting the name, passing all like security keys and all that stuff. And it takes a while to get it up on the Android store. For the iOS store, it gets even more harder. It's $100 per year, so it's not just a one-time fee. You have to pay $100 per year to get something on the App Store, and then your app will get scrutinized like no other. Like if you, I remember I tried to deploy one of my applications, and I wanted to add Google sign-in to my application because that's probably the most common way people sign in.
Right.
I had email password, and then I wanted to add like Google sign-in as another option just because it's so popular. Like I like it. I added it to my Android store, obviously everything deployed, and then I put it up on to get to App Store, and it got declined because if you're adding Google, they want to make sure Apple sign-in is an option as well. So I had to figure out.
They force you to have an Apple sign-in?
Yeah. Yes.
I guess maybe I have to check my app, but I guess we probably have Apple sign-in as well. But that's awkward because like our Apple sign-in isn't available in the web browser. I don't think it might be. But then you have to like go and retrofit your website so people don't have like orphan accounts.
Yep.
That are just that's.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't realize they had that restriction. Man,
maybe
Apple is just like really like they really use their market power, don't they?
Yep. On the one hand, though, like if you look around the other side, it's kind of nice for the end user. Like that there's like if someone likes using Apple sign in, maybe that's another example. So like I added the Apple sign in button, and then it wasn't to like the design spec of the Apple sign-in that they have on the iOS, like on their, the Cupertino design language. It wasn't like, I think the edges weren't rounded properly. Like it was a square button instead of like a nice rounded edge button or something along those lines. I don't remember the exact, but it, like the design of the Apple button wasn't due to their spec. So then I had to fix that. And then finally it got, released into the App Store. So, but like on one hand for the user, it's kind of nice. Like, if someone designed a really ugly Apple sign-in, like with a red apple or something, then you don't know what you're really clicking. But this button is something you've used on multiple other apps that like it should be good and it should be safe. And they have I think they usually have a person actually test your application and go through it. So yeah, it makes it a lot harder. But I think that's also why like getting an iOS app is like the highest friction, but usually the highest reward because iOS users paid the most and stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean that's where most of the money is like the I've heard that like even though fewer people use the Apple App Store, like a vast majority of the money to be made as a mobile app developer is in the Apple ecosystem. Yep. And Android, it's just harder to get people to open their wallets and pay for things. And that may be because generally like Android is cheaper, and the countries where Apple is like more popular or generally more like wealthy like European countries and stuff, and where Android is more popular is like the global south and Asia and places like that. So obviously it's a lot more work building a mobile app, but it does have those benefits that we talked about earlier where it's like people are clicking it and it's stickier essentially.
Yes. And it's I guess it's not while that during the actual development process is like they're both simple and easy, so you can build a working application. It's just the part where you're getting to actually deploy it and have other people try it out and use it is where it gets a lot more difficult.
Yeah. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about you do mobile app development as kind of a side job. Like you did it, you built some projects in it. Mm-hmm. You've done kind of like startup things, and then. Do you do mobile app development at all as a developer advocate?
Yep. So what happened at the end of the whole Navistar career was that I ended up enjoying, learning mobile development. I was creating YouTube tutorials and all that stuff. And I thought I'm still young. Like I don't have kids. I should just try and go for it. Like see what I could do with that whole creator career path. So I went for it. I did all right. I made enough to pay the bills, which was like the threshold that I wanted to pass. But also during that time, I learned about what a developer advocate is, or developer advocacy in general. And then I was like, I never heard of that word before I ended up quitting. I think I heard about it 2 months after I quit that job. And I learned about what developer advocacy is. I'm like, wait a second, people pay for this stuff? Like, this is what I'm doing right now. Like, this is what I quit my job to do is basically a similar job to developer advocacy, is teaching people about technology. So then I was like, I'll give it a shot. Like, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I quit my job to do. Like, why not do it with actual financial support? Like, do it for a job. So yeah, then I interviewed with a bunch of companies. I ended up working at this company called Agora, and there I was hired as a Flutter developer advocate. So I did work a lot with Flutter.
Awesome. So Tadas, you have gone so deep into web development that your newest project, Hungry Mind, hungry with an I instead of a Y, doesn't even have like a mobile app. Can you talk about that kind of swing back over to web development?
So I still do Flutter, by the way. Like, I still work on Flutter at my full-time job and everything. So Flutter's not gone anywhere. But like I said, I kind of reached a point where I was comfortable building most things in Flutter, and I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more with working on the web development, which scared me at the very beginning. So I also wanted to build a course platform, just because, I don't know, I feel like every content creator eventually wants to build a course platform, and it's a pretty big challenge. And I thought it'd be fun to undergo and try to like build something that I think is a little different than I've seen, at least in the Flutter community, and also challenging enough to where I have to learn all these other tools. So I still do Flutter. The platform is called hungrymind.com, and on there it's just a Flutter course. So we call it the best Flutter course on the internet, because that's the goal. It has two specific goals. It's to, one, teach you how to build almost any project with Flutter. Like, have the base level concepts to where you're comfortable with building anything in Flutter, and then to do it better than anybody else on the internet. So that's our goal. That's why we named it that. I'm working on it with another Flutter creator called Robert. So both of us are, putting basically all our knowledge that we have learned over these years from Flutter, putting it all into one resource that want to keep, getting better and keep improving and making it the best place to learn Flutter online. And I really so I wanted to learn web development, and then I learned it using Astro because it gave me the same feeling that Flutter did when I first started. And yeah, the course includes like everything, like streaming videos, which is a complex topic, has a whole backend like authentication system. We're using Terso for the database, so as SQLite, which was, learn like all about how that works, learn about how to create nice little code blocks within Markdown, quizzes, database structures. It's a big project. I'm super proud of it. I think it looks amazing, and it's something that's a little different than there is in the Flutter community. So super excited about that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think a lot of course creators do create their own kind of course platform, but very few of them go to the level of, what you've built. Definitely.
I think, Yeah, I was going to say, I think everybody has this, they have the dream of trying to make something different. And I've seen other course creators content creators build course platforms, but it's kind of hard to make it, unique and different. But we're really trying to make it good. And I've been building this for over 2 years now. I went through a whole process where I started with a really simple course. Then I realized, this is not a really good course. This platform's not that good. So I did a whole rewrite. I think this is now the 4th or 5th rewrite of the whole platform. We even had 5 courses before. So I had a Flutter course, I had an Astro course, I had a Next.js course, and I had 2 Flutter courses. So 2 or 3 Flutter courses. So yeah, now we kind of stripped everything back down, and I feel like realize every time that it's most important to just go for quality, go for making the best thing that you can. And yeah, that's why we named it that, and kind of stripping down all the extra fluff and just getting it down to making sure you're doing everything correctly and keeping it simple and as quality as it can get.
Yeah, with FreeCodeCamp, like when we created it, it was basically like I had this kind of platform that I created that taught a lot of different skills, and I just distilled it down to like, what is one thing that we can teach that we can do a good job of, and that's JavaScript. And then it kind of like grew out from there. And it sounds like you're taking a similar approach, teaching, just getting really good at teaching Flutter before you teach a whole lot of other potential skills. That's really cool.
Did you go through multiple like rounds of rebuilding the platform for JavaScript?
I mean, you could say that the curriculum is constantly being like refreshed and updated, and we've got some big updates to the curriculum coming soon. And it's just a constant kind of like renewal in terms of what are employers looking for, what are the contemporary tools, what are the key concepts that haven't changed fundamentally since maybe like the 70s and 80s, the sort of stuff you probably learned in your degree, just like system design concepts, algorithms, and data structures, things like that. So yeah, and trying to make sure we balance like new tools, but make sure like the fundamentals are covered. Now what we're setting out to do is creating like extremely comprehensive broad education, whereas it sounds like with your tool, like if somebody already has some developer background and they just want to quickly learn Flutter, they can like dive into that and create kind of the specialization within their existing skill set.
Right. So the prerequisite is that Dart or just any other object-oriented programming, like I'm sure you could pick up. So that's a prerequisite for this, and eventually we hope to make other courses, things we're excited about, but we really want to lock down and just create like what the title of the course says, like the best Flutter course on the internet. And it's a hard thing to do.
And Dart is a programming language created by Google like maybe 10, 12 years ago. Yep. But that is like the main application of Dart, my understanding is just, this Flutter framework that sits on top of Dart. Can you talk about your relationship with Dart and like, do you use Dart for anything outside of Flutter, or is it just mainly a tool for Flutter?
It's mainly a tool for Flutter, but I would say that Dart is my favorite language. But it's also a language that's very similar to most other object-oriented languages. So I think anybody that knows JavaScript or other languages, like switching between TypeScript and Dart, for example, is like pretty straightforward. Just the syntax I sometimes mess up between that, but it's one of my favorite languages. I feel like it has the least fluff and also is very clean and like easy to understand. But I don't use it for anything else. I have seen people. There is backend things you could write in Dart. There's a startup at YC trying to build a backend in Dart. So there is things out there, but I haven't used them.
Awesome, man. YC, of course, being the San Francisco Accelerator, Y Combinator. So I'm glad to hear that there's a lot of activity within the community. Again, we use Flutter, so by extension Dart, extensively at FreeCodeCamp. So yeah, I'm always happy when like ecosystems are built out. Like we've been seeing some amazing activity within like the PHP community recently, for example, Laravel becoming like a serious kind of like standalone project, and raising funds and stuff like that. So it's cool to see not just JavaScript and Python winning, but also see these other tools and languages gaining ground as well.
How do you like Dart compared to other languages?
I personally haven't really coded in it. Like I did some basic tutorials back when it first came out, like 12 years ago or something like that. So that is my extent, but it was very similar to like JavaScript and Python. It's just a high level scripting language. And if anybody wants to try it, of course there's your course that covers it in addition to covering Flutter. So that sounds like a really good place to start. Yeah. Other than developing Hungry Mind, like what are your near-term plans as a dev, and like do you have any big goals for the next few years?
So I think this platform's kind of been my big focus for the past 2 years, and I want to make it something good. I think the whole overarching goal of it is just to help people create more things. Of course, the easiest way for me to start doing that is by creating a course, help people very directly. But eventually, I hope to create, if this course is successful, I hope to create more courses. If people actually enjoy this style of teaching, of course, I want to keep creating more courses, but I also want to create some tooling maybe around to solve the issue and make it easier for people to just create more. I feel like that's such a fulfilling way of living. Like,
Yeah.
as long as you have all the, like for me at least, my parents got through all those hardships, kind of gave me a nice baseline in life where I don't have any unmet like base level needs, and I found massive fulfillment through learning and building, and has just been the trend for like my whole life, and I want to give back and try to help others go through the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for everything you're doing for the developer community. You're not just resting on your laurels. A lot of people, they get the good developer job and they just chill out and like spend their weekends gaming or just taking it easy. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with just going traveling and stuff like that. Once you reach a certain level of prosperity as a developer, there's no obligation that says you have to get involved in open source or you have to figure out ways to create tutorials on YouTube to help the next kind of generation of developers get into the field and things like that. But whenever I see people doing it, I always want to, stop and applaud them because I do appreciate certainly, and it inspires me to see people going out there and figuring out ways to take their own creativity and build things that help other people do the same. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it. But for me, it's fun. I feel like there's a way you can frame all this, like video games. I used to play, other video games, and I kind of just stopped because this ended up being more fun. Like, yes, it's a higher for like initial step to like get started on doing something harder, but then once you get into the flow state and like you're doing something challenging that's just a little more challenging than you're used to, I feel like it's basically like a video game. Life's just a video game.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely focus on like stat maxing, which I mean, some people just focus on driving up a single number, basically their net worth. But for me, like, I always think in terms of like, like the skill tree. Like, I want to die with like a fully unlocked skill tree. And on that note, I think it's super cool that you like bought a sewing machine recently and you started sewing.
Kind of. I bought one. I did a few sewing projects just because I actually needed it. But I have way too many hobbies, and I want to, like, the one rule I made for myself is never to, like, as long as I can afford it, obviously, never cheap out on something that's like creative. If I want to do something creative, just go for it. It's like always, I very rarely ever regretted, buying a tool or the sewing machine. Like, even if I don't use it that much, it's a fun thing to have tried out. So,
yeah. When you say you have like a lot of hobbies, are there any other hobbies that are like that you just like one day decided like I want to get into X or I want to get into Y? Like, are there any other interesting things people might find intriguing?
So I wouldn't say I'm great at any of these hobbies, but there's like every sport I've basically done. Used to play basketball when I was a kid, but now I play volleyball with friends, pickleball, tennis, all those sports. The other ones I randomly picked up was working on my car and cars. I built a camper van out of a Toyota Sienna that we took across the country to California and to New York. So that was really fun. And like it has a whole bed that it comes out like,
wow.
It has like wooden slats. So like the bed comes out and you can turn it into a bench. It has like a battery, a fridge in there and everything. And like this little Toyota Sienna. So that's a pretty cool project. And yeah, redid the whole house. Like the before and after images are pretty crazy. Want to get into like welding. Like I have a whole bunch of woodworking things that I want to get into. I feel like I got to limit myself to how many things I let myself get into.
Yeah. I mean, does that extend to, as a developer, are you the kind of person that just wants to go out and try all these different tools and frequently tweak your workflow? And
yeah, definitely. So I went through a whole phase of like, even outside development, like productivity tools, like all the Notion things, like I've gone through, tweaking little things in my workspace, like through Obsidian and everything. And same thing with development. Like I went through Flutter. I tried React on the web. I tried Astro. I tried Svelte. I tried Vue. I really like Svelte. Didn't like React. Tried Next.js. Like all these frameworks. I tried all of them. And I think I decided I have to limit myself there too. Like I got to get, there's the point of writing software is to actually build things. So I feel like a lot better to learn a few things well and then use those to build cool things. So yeah, I think it just I'm just a curious person with like when it comes to everything, and have to limit myself a little bit just so I could get things that I actually want to get done.
Yeah. So you have to exercise restraint when it comes to your own insatiable curiosity.
Yeah.
Is there ever like been like a specific moment where you realized you were like way out in the weeds? Like for me, it was, I was having like, I had switched to like what's called programmer Dvorak, which you might be saying like, oh, it's Dvorak. No, that's the composer. Dvorak is like the name of the keyboard style. It's like spelled the same, but you know, when people come to the U.S., like Ellis Island, they like change their names and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's how this guy's name is pronounced. But basically they took like the English, you know, QWERTY keyboard and they rearranged it. But then somebody's like, it's not rearranged enough for programmers. So they like rearranged the numbers and like all these other keys. I mean, like the entire keyboard. And I was sitting like on a train trying to code in, you know, Programmer's Dvorak inside Emacs with all my macros running and all this stuff. And I was just like, and then like I got on somebody, and the problem with that is like you learn Programmer Dvorak and you're never going to walk up to some keyboard and already, you use Programmer Dvorak too. You know, nobody was using that. Very few people even use Dvorak, and very few people have like, I guess Emacs is technically pre-installed on most Linux boxes, but like I don't know if it's on Windows or Mac. Actually, I haven't checked. If it's on, but like I decided ultimately my tool chain was way too bespoke and too difficult to like configure the environment. And I talked to like some DevOps and he's like, oh yeah, I just have like this curl command and I go and I curl my entire environment and do all this stuff. And I'm like, people are not going to appreciate me. Like, and at my office, like I would leave, you know, like I'd like curl the environment and like tweak all these settings on their computer and they'd be like, what are you doing? You know? So like there have been points where I was like, no, I've gone too far down this rabbit hole. I don't think Emacs is stock on Mac. Vim is. But like that, like I just found myself in this situation where I was like, wow, like I have customized way too much and I need to step back and get more like in step with like the typical developer, so it's easier for me to relate to them and understand them. And also, I also felt like I was learning all these esoteric tools as a way of procrastinating actually getting better at data structures and algorithms and things like that. Yeah, have you had any experience like that where you just like went way too far and you're like you had to kind of snap back?
Not necessarily with developer tooling. Like I did try Vim and everything. I tried to learn. I did learn it. Just so some of the commands. You know, I tried it for like a week or so, and then I realized, like, I don't know, VS Code works good for creating content specifically, like for teaching. Like you kind of should use VS Code just because most people use it. And I stepped back. So I feel like I haven't gone too deep in developer tooling, but I have caught myself, you know, going too deep down with my confidence of what I'm building. Like I mentioned with the whole first trying to build a social network as one of my first like web projects. I feel like that was I was like, I need to take a little step back and, you know, get back to the fundamentals of how the web works.
Yeah, getting back to basics. Well, I will tell you, like in my experience, there's never been a point where I've been like, I spent way too much time learning the basics. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it's possible. And one last question, like, so you studied computer engineering, which is different from software engineering, which there are software engineering degrees. The most common thing that people study though is computer science. How much of like the math and physics and other kind of like skills that you learned through your degree would you say has been useful? And like, do you ever find yourself pulling out something and like you're surprised that something that you learned in school suddenly becomes super relevant? Does that happen very often?
No. my degree is pretty useless. I think, like I said, I learned almost everything on that job. Even I only took 2 CS classes. Like I think school, the best thing about school is just meeting the people around, right? And then the process of learning how to solve problems. I think that's the biggest thing the school teaches, and I feel like that's why I like what you guys are doing at freeCodeCamp, because you teach that thought process of how to go through and learn it. I feel like freeCodeCamp teaches programming just as good as probably any university. I started that first job not knowing anything from programming. I learned it on the way there, and I don't remember if I No, because freeCodeCamp is JavaScript. So I had to learn C somewhere else for that first job. But, before going to my first job, if it was JavaScript, I probably would have learned just as much. I'm sure, you get really deep into the master's level, you get into some crazy physics. And if you go into a job that's very niche for that one thing, then school might be useful. But for me, my career's changed so much already within the first 4 years. I was not doing anything coding really that I was doing in school. I learned, like I said, I had data structures and algorithms was my only real course that I did terrible in. 4 years into my career, I was making YouTube videos and, teaching how to build mobile apps with a framework that didn't even exist while I was in college. So I think, I made a lot of friends in college, learned how to learn a little bit in college, but as far as things directly that I learned there, I haven't really used it at all.
Well, it sounds like the opportunity at the trucking company Navistar, I think, is what you said.
Yes.
It's the parent company for school buses and trucks.
Yep.
But working on that kind of mission critical software that has to be rigidly planned out and rigorously tested and things like that. Sounds like that was really the crucible for a lot of your skills as an engineer. What advice would you have to somebody who is looking to get into those kinds of companies? Let's say hypothetically somebody's I want to get into a quote unquote real engineering thing, which is not figuring out how to put AR mustaches on people or something like that, but it is actually trying to, do something that helps improve gas efficiency, fuel efficiency, or helps with mission, safety systems and things like that. What kind of opportunities, where should somebody look for those kinds of opportunities?
So I feel like those are tougher to get in because I think those companies that are working on, those mission critical safety things are older companies. So Navistar, I think, was founded in the 1800s or something way before they were creating tractors for farming, I think, when they first began. So those companies, a lot of them still do require a degree. So the reason I got that job was because of the internship, and the reason I got that internship was because they were at a fair at the university. So unfortunately, I feel like those older companies that are working on very root level things are harder to get into. But there are, plenty new companies who have less stringent rules around having a university degree, where I think for those, you just want to be active online and doing things and have a resume of things that you've done that you can show that you know the technology, and then hopefully that can give you a step up.
Awesome. Well, that's super helpful. So and I did check in. They 1800s with tractors. That's amazing.
Yep.
By the way, if you can hear my son, he just got home. If he's playing piano, well, that's not too distracting. But
that's not bad.
Yeah, man, it's been an absolute blast hearing your insights. You are an extremely pragmatic developer who's not afraid of picking up new tools, and it seems like you're just constantly picking up new tools and seeing what can this do for me. How can I apply this? You're not afraid of picking up old tools, whether that's sewing machines, whether that's carpentry tools. And I see you as just kind of this to some extent like an everyman dev, everyman engineer who just sees the world as a whole bunch of things that they can pick up and potentially put to use and apply to get things done. And so that's extremely impressive quality, and you just have this confidence that is rare. Most people would be incredibly daunted getting a C in algorithms and data structures, then going straight into the most rigorous type of computer programming and stuff like that. But you don't seem to shy away from that. Is there any? Do you chalk that up to your to anything in your experience that gave you that courage?
I mean, I don't know. I never really thought about it, but I feel like the worst thing that could happen is that you look a little stupid in front of somebody, and compared to kind of where I grew up, that's nothing. My parents went through way more difficult times than me someone thinking wrong of you at work. But on the other hand, just personally, I've never thought someone that asked a question, try to get deeper. I would never think of somebody worse than that. So just don't think of yourself in that scenario. Don't be scared to look maybe not the smartest person in the room. Just try to learn and absorb as much as you can from people. And that's been my approach. And I just know there's most people are there to help out. Like, especially at a job, like your boss is there to, help you be good. Like, he wants you to succeed. Don't be scared to go and ask him. And in terms of diving into these other things where I don't really know, like, I guess it just kind of flows into the whole of just kind of go for it and see what happens. And hopefully you learn a lot along the way.
Right on. Well, learning a lot along the way, name of the game, man. Tadas, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Free Code Camp weekly podcast, and I hope everybody has enjoyed. Be sure to check the show notes. Again, I've included links to lots of Tadas's projects, some of his videos that I found inspiring, and man, I really appreciate everything you're doing for the community.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, until next week, everybody, happy coding.